Bill, I now call the member for Borkham Hills.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I too rise to support the Multicultural New South Wales Legislative Amendment Bill and also make a side comment about the conjecture that's gone on thus far about who has the best multicultural credentials. And I know it was the Labor Party that introduced the White Australia policy. I know it was the Labor Party that introduced the White Australia policy. They opposed Liberal attempts to get rid of the White Australia policy. Meanwhile, on our side of the chamber, we have John Barilaro, an Italian, Gladys Berejiklian, an Armenian, Charles Casaselli, another Italian, Victor Dominello, from Thomas George, Christian Lebanese, Chris Galaptis, Macedonian, Tony Issa, Christian Lebanese, Jeff Lee, Chinese, Dominic Ferrante, Swiss, Adrian Piccoli, another Italian, Andy Rowan, Iraqi, John Sidoti, the newly promoted John Sidoti, who is the new Parliamentary Secretary for Planning. We have so many people from a diverse background. You can imagine why this legislation is very, very important to those on this side of the chamber. And of course, yours truly.
Order! I can't hear the member for Borkham Hills.
And of course, Mr Acting Speaker, yours truly, who I'm very proud of my Celtic, Scottish, Protestant roots, but both my grandmothers were Polish, and I'm very proud of my multicultural credentials as well. Mr Acting Speaker, this side of the House supports Australia's unique cultural diversity, as I've just highlighted the reasons why, because they support this government. But we also recognise the importance of binding values of hard work, mateship and a fair go. These values became the guiding principles of our society under the framework of the Westminster system and the associated principles of democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, free speech and a free people. Multicultural New South Wales is about giving people with different ancestries the opportunity to have a fair go. It's not about letting groups separate off into their own separate community, but to allow every individual to contribute and enrich life in New South Wales. This bill sensibly removes the word multiculturalism from the legislation and replaces it with the more neutral multicultural. Multiculturalism, the word, has become tied up in political correctness and permissiveness, the ideology of the left and those who introduced the White Australia policy. Those different cultural origins are permitted to remain separate from the Australian mainstream. This is unacceptable in modern Australia. All should participate fully in Australian life, and equally important is all that given the opportunity to participate. The word multicultural is more suitable to recognise that those of different origins of those in this state are unique, and highlighting the unique contribution each individual makes. John Howard recently said that we were, quote, able to absorb people from all around the world because we have essentially been a group of people who have tried to do with people on the basis of their merit and their individual qualities, unquote. On the right, on this side, we have always been focused on the individual, not minorities, even though Ayn Rand said that the smallest minority is the individual. We must always be judging people on their individual qualities and merits. A person's ancestral heritage should not make a difference to our perception of them as a person. However, that is not to say that we should be intolerant. Australians have no tolerance for those who bring past cultural conflicts back with them. Our love of freedom and peace binds Australians together. This bill assists in promoting social cohesion through a strong focus on citizenship and an obligation to work together to improve the state. Tony Abbott used the language of Team Australia and was inappropriately criticised. It is more than necessary that we all work as a unified team supporting the fundamental values of Australia. I am sure that we all recognise the evil of the Islamic State and their presence in Australia. To fight insidious organisations such as ISIS, we must work together as a community to defend the most important Australian values that we see, and which are, of course, alien to organisations like ISIS. This bill specifies multicultural principles, the first of which is all individuals in New South Wales, irrespective of their linguistic, religious and ancestral background, should demonstrate a unified commitment to Australia. The second of which is that all individuals in New South Wales should recognise the importance of shared values governed by the rule of law within a democratic framework. And it is these multicultural principles that we must never forget, as these are the principles that will ensure that individuals and groups remain committed to defending our values and remain committed to being part of the Australian mainstream, not branching off into the violent and un-Australian ventures of organisations such as ISIS. In my role as Parliamentary Secretary to the Premier for the centenary of Anzac, I've attended many services commemorating the contribution that many countries have made fighting alongside Australia throughout our history. People with many different ancestral origins have served alongside the Australian Defence Force and continue to serve with the Australian Defence Forces. This is an excellent example of how multicultural principles in action, recognising each individual's contribution to protecting and defending Australian values and the Australian way of life, focusing on what unites us, not what divides us. This bill also brings the governance of the Community Relations Commission in line with modern practice. Amendment to the Act will give legislative force to the arrangements. When the former chair of this Community Relations Commission, who was also the CEO, resigned in January, the role was split into two positions, a full-time CEO and a part-time chairperson. This bill will bring legislative force into this arrangement. However, the bill makes much broader changes. It renames the Community Relations Commission Multicultural New South Wales. The CEO will act as the head of Multicultural New South Wales and the chairperson will act as the chair of the advisory body. The bill introduces broad selection criteria for those seeking appointment to the advisory board. This selection criteria includes two people who are under the age of 24 years, something that I certainly commend, to represent youth from New South Wales, in addition to having those from diverse backgrounds. Members of the advisory board will serve a 3-year term to a maximum of 9 years. There will also be more stringent requirements for advisory board members to attend meetings than previously. The amendments will also be able to report on the state of the community relations in New South Wales to be made on a financial year basis. Mr Acting Speaker, this bill demonstrates that New South Wales' commitment to ensuring a diverse New South Wales celebrates the contribution of those different ancestral heritage. It recognises those of different cultures and the need for them to work as part of Australia and demonstrate a commitment to Australia, and therefore I commend the bill to the House.
I thank the member for Baulkham Hills.